Officer Ryan Caldwell stares at the federal badge in disbelief, his hand trembling on his weapon. The black woman he had forced from her car now stands confidently before him. Not as his victim but as his judge. His career, his freedom, even his life now hang in the balance of what happens in the next 60 seconds. Before we dive into this shocking confrontation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced racial profiling, and subscribe to hear more stories about justice being served. Now, let's rewind to see how a routine traffic stop became the catalyst for exposing decades of systemic racism in one police department. The secure conference room at the FBI Civil Rights Division headquarters in Washington, D.C. hummed with tension as Assistant Director Wallace slid a thick folder across the table towards Special Agent Jasmine Morgan. At 34, Jasmine had already distinguished herself with multiple successful operations exposing corruption in law enforcement agencies across the country. Her reputation for meticulous evidence gathering and unshakable composure under pressure made her the obvious choice for this sensitive assignment. The photos inside the folder showed aerial views of Oakwood, an affluent suburban community with manicured lawns and an almost exclusively white population. Jasmine recognized it immediately. "This is my hometown," she said quietly, memories flooding back of being one of only 12 black students in her high school, of the suspicious glances, the random searches of her locker, the whispered slurs when teachers weren't listening. Wallace nodded grimly. "That's partly why you were selected. Your personal connection gives you insight others might miss." He explained that over the past 5 years, the Justice Department had received an alarming number of complaints from minority drivers passing through Oakwood. The pattern suggested systematic racial profiling, with black and Latino motorists being stopped at rates 8 times higher than whites, often resulting in questionable searches and asset seizures. Previous attempts to investigate had stalled due to the department's powerful political connections. The mayor, the police chief, half the city council, they all belonged to the same country club. Wallace continued. They protect their own. Jasmine studied the personnel files of the officers with the highest number of minority stops. One name appeared with disturbing frequency. Officer Ryan Caldwell, a 12-year veteran with 27 civilian complaints but 0 disciplinary actions. His photo showed a square-jawed white man with cold blue eyes and a tight smile that didn't reach them. "You'll be operating completely undercover," Wallace emphasized. "Your cover is as a freelance marketing consultant who just moved to town. We've secured an apartment, established your digital footprint, everything you need." He paused, his expression grave. "This assignment carries significant personal risk. These officers believe they're untouchable. If your cover is compromised, we can't guarantee immediate extraction." Jasmine thought of her father, who had been beaten by police during a civil rights march in the 60s, who had taught her that justice sometimes required personal sacrifice. "I understand the risks," she replied firmly. "And I prefer to work alone on this one. An unfamiliar partner would just be another variable to manage." The assistant director seemed about to object, then nodded reluctantly. "You'll check in daily using the secure protocols. At the first sign of trouble, you abort, and we send in a full team." 2 days later, Jasmine arrived in Oakwood, driving a leased mid-range sedan that wouldn't attract attention. Her apartment, a 1-bedroom unit in a nondescript complex, came furnished with bland, forgettable pieces. Within hours, she had swept for surveillance devices, installed her own counter-surveillance equipment, and established multiple secure communication channels with her FBI handlers. On her laptop, she created detailed profiles of her primary targets within the Oakwood Police Department, particularly focusing on Officer Caldwell. His record showed a disturbing pattern of escalation, with complaints becoming more serious over time. Most troubling were 3 separate incidents where black men alleged he had threatened to plant drugs in their vehicles. All 3 complaints had been dismissed for lack of evidence. As night fell on her first day back in the town that had once made her feel so unwelcome, Jasmine stood by the window, watching the patrol cars cruising the quiet streets. She thought about how the teenage girl who had fled this place after graduation was now returning as a federal agent with the power to bring its darkest aspects into the light. "Time to reintroduce myself to Oakwood," she whispered to the darkness. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jasmine's apartment as she finalized her approach for establishing her cover identity. She dressed carefully in business casual attire, professional enough to match her freelance consultant backstory but not so formal as to stand out. Her natural hair was styled in a way that was both authentic to her identity and deliberately memorable. She wanted the officers to notice her, to remember her as the new black woman in town. The Coffee Corner, a small cafe just 2 blocks from the police station, seemed the perfect place to begin. According to her research, it was a regular hangout for off-duty officers. Jasmine settled at a table with a clear view of both the entrance and the counter, opening her laptop to maintain the appearance of someone engrossed in work. Within an hour, her patience was rewarded when 3 uniformed officers entered, laughing among themselves. She recognized Officer Wilson from her briefing files, a younger officer often partnered with Caldwell. The barista greeted them by name, clearly familiar with their regular orders. Jasmine observed their interactions with other patrons, noting how the atmosphere subtly shifted as they moved through the space, conversations pausing momentarily, smiles becoming slightly fixed. After they collected their drinks, Wilson glanced in her direction, his expression changing almost imperceptibly as he registered her presence. He murmured something to his colleagues, and 3 pairs of eyes briefly assessed her before they continued their conversation. Jasmine made a mental note of this first reaction, while appearing absorbed in her screen. Later that afternoon, she visited Oakwood Community Bank to open a local account, another step in establishing her cover. The bank manager, a thin white man with thinning hair, seemed unnecessarily thorough in verifying her documentation. "We just need to be careful, you understand," he said with a tight smile that reminded her of interactions from her childhood. Fraud is so common these days. As she completed the paperwork, she noticed Officer Caldwell entering the bank, presumably on his break. He was taller in person than his file photo suggested, with the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority. His gaze swept the bank interior in what appeared to be a habitual security check before landing on her. Unlike Wilson's brief assessment, Caldwell's stare lingered, his eyes narrowing slightly as if mentally flagging her as someone to watch. Jasmine maintained her composure, signing the final documents without acknowledging his attention. That evening, she deliberately drove past the police station at shift change, timing her pass to coincide with Caldwell's departure in his patrol car. As expected, he pulled out behind her, maintaining a consistent 3-car distance without activating his lights. She drove precisely at the speed limit, making a series of turns through residential streets before heading toward her apartment complex. The patrol car followed for 8 blocks before turning away, but not before Jasmine had captured the entire interaction on the multiple recording devices concealed in her vehicle. Back in her apartment, she uploaded the day's surveillance footage to the secure FBI server, adding timestamped notes about each interaction. A message from her handler appeared on her encrypted phone. Subject C ran your plates at 1,742 hours. Registration triggered no flags as expected. Officers discussing new black woman in town on unofficial channels. Proceed with caution. Jasmine smiled grimly. She had their attention, exactly as planned. Now she needed to give them an opportunity to act on their apparent suspicions. As she prepared for bed, she reviewed Caldwell's personnel file once more, paying particular attention to the patterns in his traffic stops. He showed a clear preference for isolated locations, away from potential witnesses or surveillance cameras. Tomorrow, she would begin creating opportunities for just such an encounter, while ensuring her own protection through meticulous documentation. Outside her window, an Oakwood patrol car cruised slowly past her building for the 3rd time that night. The game had begun. Jasmine's investigation gained momentum over the next 2 weeks as she methodically documented the racial disparities in Oakwood's policing. Rising each morning before dawn, she positioned herself near high-traffic intersections, discreetly recording police interactions with drivers. The numbers told a damning story. Black drivers, though representing less than 7% of the traffic, accounted for nearly 60% of all stops. Her data showed that Officer Caldwell was particularly aggressive, stopping minority drivers at rates far exceeding even his colleagues' discriminatory patterns. When these drivers were pulled over, their vehicles were searched 4 times more frequently than those of white drivers, despite lower rates of contraband being found. The community meeting at Oakwood Public Library provided Jasmine with human faces to attach to these statistics. She slipped quietly into the back row as residents gathered to discuss community-police relations, a euphemism for the growing tensions between law enforcement and minorities in the area. An elderly black man named Walter Johnson rose shakily to his feet, his voice trembling with emotion as he described his grandson's arrest the previous month. "They threw him against the car so hard it cracked his ribs," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. 17 years old, honor student, never been in trouble. Officer pulled him over for a taillight, but we all know why he really stopped him. Heads nodded in grim recognition around the room. When I went to the station to file a complaint, they threatened to charge him with resisting if I didn't drop it. Jasmine recorded the testimony discreetly, noting how many similar stories emerged during the 2-hour meeting. Not a single white resident reported experiencing such treatment. Afterward, she introduced herself to Walter, expressing sympathy for his grandson's experience. "You new to Oakwood?" he asked, studying her with eyes that had seen decades of injustice. "Just moved here," she confirmed. "I'm a freelance consultant." Walter nodded slowly. "Word of advice, young lady. Don't drive after dark if you can help it. Especially not alone." The following day, Jasmine orchestrated a chance encounter with Officer Caldwell at Riverside Grocery, the upscale market where her surveillance had shown he regularly shopped on Thursdays. Pretending to struggle with reaching an item on a high shelf, she created an opportunity for interaction when he reflexively assisted her. "Thank you, officer," she said with a carefully calibrated smile, neither too friendly nor too reserved. "I'm still learning my way around town." Caldwell assessed her with that same penetrating stare she had noticed at the bank. "You just move here?" His tone was conversational, but his eyes remained watchful. "About 2 weeks ago," she replied. "It's a beautiful town. Very orderly. We work hard to keep it that way," he said. Emphasis on the we, that clearly excluded her. Some places let things slide, and before you know it, property values drop, crime goes up. Oakwood has standards. The implication hung in the air between them. "I appreciate a community that values safety," Jasmine responded neutrally, watching his reaction. His slight nod suggested he had interpreted her comment as alignment with his worldview. "Well, welcome to Oakwood. Drive carefully." The warning was delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Through carefully constructed database queries run through FBI channels, Jasmine discovered disturbing patterns in the department's internal records. Traffic stop reports frequently included language that appeared template-driven, with identical phrasing describing furtive movements or suspicious behavior, justifying searches of minority drivers. More concerning were the apparent alterations to records after civilian complaints were filed, with original narratives being modified to justify actions retroactively. Her investigation revealed that Caldwell belonged to an informal group within the department, officers who socialized together, covered each other's shifts, and consistently backed each other's accounts during complaint investigations. This tight-knit circle, referring to themselves as the Guardians in private texts, seemed to operate with implicit protection from department leadership. On day 17 of her assignment, Jasmine witnessed Caldwell and 2 other officers conducting a traffic stop of a black teenage male driving a modest sedan. from her discreet observation point. She documented clear violations of department procedures, no body cameras activated, no clear statement of the reason for the stop, and an immediate order for the young man to exit his vehicle without justification. When the teenager asked why he was being stopped, Caldwell's response was to wrench open the car door and physically remove him. Jasmine photographed the entire interaction, capturing images of the officers using excessive force while searching the visibly frightened young man. As she adjusted her position to better document the escalating situation, the flash from her camera caught Officer Wilson's attention. He turned sharply in her direction, squinting against the setting sun. Jasmine retreated quickly, but not before seeing Wilson point her out to Caldwell. Have you ever witnessed police officers abusing their authority like Officer Caldwell? Comment number 1 if you believe racist officers should be immediately fired, or number 2 if you think they deserve a second chance after proper training. Don't forget to like this video if you're outraged by the systemic racism Jasmine is uncovering, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about brave individuals fighting for justice. What do you think will happen now that Jasmine has been spotted? Will she maintain her cover, or is her investigation about to be exposed? Let's continue to find out. Jasmine noticed the surveillance immediately. Officer Wilson's unmarked police cruiser appeared with increasing frequency in her rearview mirror, maintaining a distance that was professional but unmistakable. At the grocery store, the coffee shop, even outside her apartment building, his presence became a constant shadow in her peripheral vision. Sometimes he took photos, not bothering to be subtle about it. The message was clear: we're watching you. During her daily secure communication with her FBI handler, Jasmine reported the development. They're running a counter-surveillance operation, she explained. Not sophisticated, but persistent. Wilson is the point man, but I've spotted at least 2 other officers involved in the rotation. Her handler's concern was evident even through the encrypted text. Consider extraction. We can send a team to complete the investigation. Jasmine weighed the options carefully. She had gathered substantial evidence of racial profiling, enough to justify a preliminary review of the department. But the deeper patterns of misconduct, the possible conspiracy among officers to cover up civil rights violations, remained largely circumstantial. She needed more direct evidence. I'm continuing the operation, she decided, but I'll implement additional security protocols. That evening, she prepared carefully for what she anticipated would be a crucial phase of the investigation. She dressed in nondescript clothing, her hair pulled back, nothing that would attract attention. In her purse, she placed her FBI credentials in a hidden compartment, accessible but not immediately visible during a standard search. She activated the multiple recording devices concealed throughout her vehicle and on her person, each feeding to separate secure servers to ensure redundancy. The plan was simple but risky. Plant misinformation about her evening plans, suggesting she would attend a community event downtown, then take an unexpected route home along County Road 37. A lonely stretch of highway known as a prime location for Caldwell's most aggressive traffic stops. If her surveillance was correct, Wilson would relay her supposed plans to Caldwell, who would likely position himself to intercept her. The gamble paid off with chilling precision. 20 minutes after leaving her apartment, having deliberately passed Wilson in his observation position, Jasmine found herself driving along the darkened highway, the only vehicle visible in either direction. Her headlights illuminated empty fields on both sides, no houses or businesses for miles. In her rearview mirror, the sudden flash of blue lights confirmed her prediction. Officer Caldwell had taken the bait. Jasmine pulled over immediately, positioning her car to ensure optimal angles for her hidden cameras. She placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel, her movements deliberate and calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Caldwell approached slowly, flashlight beams sweeping across her interior before settling blindingly on her face. License and registration, he demanded without preamble. Jasmine noted he had not activated his body camera as required by department policy. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" she inquired politely, maintaining steady eye contact despite the disorienting light. "Taillights out," Caldwell replied, though her vehicle had passed a full inspection just days before. "License and registration, now." Jasmine complied, movements measured as she retrieved the documents from her glove compartment. As Caldwell examined them, his flashlight beam invasively swept across her body, lingering in ways that had nothing to do with officer safety. "Step out of the vehicle, Ms. Morgan," he ordered, his tone hardening. "Why am I being asked to exit my vehicle for a taillight?" Jasmine questioned, knowing her rights but also aware of how quickly these situations could escalate. "Because I said so," Caldwell replied, his hand moving to rest on his holstered weapon. "You can step out voluntarily, or I can assist you. Your choice." The threat hung in the air between them. As Jasmine carefully unbuckled her seatbelt, Caldwell added, "You people always want to make things difficult. Just following simple instructions seems impossible." The racial undertone was unmistakable. Jasmine stepped out as directed, maintaining a calm exterior while mentally documenting every procedural violation. With each passing moment, Caldwell's behavior grew more aggressive. He positioned himself uncomfortably close, using his superior height to intimidate. "Hands on the hood," he barked. "Spread your legs." When Jasmine complied, he commented, "First time you've followed directions without questioning. Maybe you're learning how things work in Oakwood." As she stood exposed and vulnerable in the harsh glare of the cruiser's headlights, Caldwell radioed for backup. "Got a possible 10 to 29 on County Road 37. Female, uncooperative." There was no indication in his system that her license had flagged any warrants, making his claim of a possible 10 to 29 a fabrication to justify the stop's escalation. "I've been completely cooperative, Officer Caldwell," Jasmine stated calmly, noting his surprise at her use of his name, which he hadn't provided. "I'm simply trying to understand the basis for this stop." "You've been watching us," he replied, voice lowered, leaning close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. "Taking pictures. Asking questions around town. That makes you of interest to me." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a second patrol car, its lights cutting through the darkness as it pulled in behind Caldwell's cruiser. Officer Wilson emerged, approaching with a hand resting casually on his weapon. The two officers exchanged a glance that confirmed Jasmine's suspicion. This was a coordinated effort, not a random stop. "Having some trouble?" Wilson asked, eyeing Jasmine with poorly disguised hostility. "Ms. Morgan here was just about to explain why she's been so interested in police business," Caldwell responded. "But first, I think we need to make sure she's not carrying anything dangerous. You never know with these outside agitators." Wilson positioned himself to block the view from the road as Caldwell moved toward Jasmine with clear intent. The isolated location, the disabled body cameras, the fabricated reason for the stop, all pointed to what was coming next. Jasmine steeled herself, knowing that what happened in the next few minutes would either break her case wide open or put her in genuine danger. The roadside search violated every protocol in the police handbook. Caldwell's hands moved with deliberate slowness across Jasmine's body, lingering in ways that constituted clear sexual harassment. His touch was invasive, his comments increasingly hostile as he found nothing to justify his suspicions. "Stand still," he snapped when she instinctively flinched away from his inappropriate contact. "This goes a lot easier if you cooperate." Jasmine maintained her composure through years of training and sheer force of will. Each violation was being recorded, each touch and word documented by multiple devices. She needed to let the situation play out without compromising her cover or escalating to a point of genuine danger. "Is this standard procedure for a taillight violation?" she asked. Voice steady despite the humiliation of being searched while Wilson watched with a smirk. "Nothing standard about you," Caldwell retorted, roughly spinning her to face him. 2 weeks in town and you're at every community meeting, taking pictures of traffic stops, asking questions about the police department. That's suspicious behavior. The handcuffs snapped around her wrists with unnecessary force, the metal biting into her skin. This is unlawful detention, Jasmine stated calmly. I've committed no crime. And you have no probable cause for an arrest. Caldwell leaned in, his face inches from hers. See, that's what gives you away. Regular people don't talk like that. They don't know phrases like unlawful detention and probable cause. You're either a lawyer or an activist, and neither is welcome in Oakwood. He glanced at Wilson. Her kind moving in is exactly what we've been working to prevent. The racial implication hung in the air, explicit now rather than merely suggested. My kind? Jasmine repeated, deliberately drawing him out. Americans with advanced degrees? Professionals? Or is there some other characteristic you're referring to, officer? Caldwell's expression hardened. Don't play games. You know exactly what I mean. Oakwood has standards. Property values to maintain. A way of life to protect. He gestured toward his patrol car. Now you're going to sit in the back while we have a look through your vehicle. If we find anything interesting, you'll be spending the night in a cell. When Jasmine again questioned the legal basis for searching her car, Caldwell's patience visibly snapped. I can add resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and whatever else I feel like by the time we reach the station. Or you can shut your mouth and maybe drive home tonight. Your choice. Wilson, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke. Ryan, maybe we should just issue a warning for the taillight and let her go. We don't need the paperwork. But Caldwell was too invested now, too committed to the course of action he had begun. Check her car. Thoroughly. She's hiding something, I can feel it. While Jasmine sat handcuffed in the patrol car, the officers conducted an increasingly desperate search of her vehicle. Her training had prepared her for this eventuality. There was nothing incriminating to find, nothing personal that would reveal her true identity. Just enough ordinary items to support her cover story as a marketing consultant recently relocated to Oakwood. Through the window, she watched Caldwell's frustration grow as each compartment revealed nothing of interest. Then he discovered the locked briefcase secured in her trunk. What's in the case? He demanded, returning to the patrol car and yanking open the door. Work materials. Client information. It's confidential, Jasmine replied truthfully, though omitting that the client was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Open it. When Jasmine shook her head, explaining that the case contained proprietary information protected by non-disclosure agreements, Caldwell's face flushed with anger. I'm not asking. Give me the key or I'll break it open. It was a critical moment. The briefcase contained nothing that would compromise her directly, but it did hold documents with federal watermarks that might raise questions. More importantly, Caldwell's willingness to destroy private property to satisfy his suspicions represented another clear civil rights violation she could add to her growing case. You need a warrant to search locked containers in my vehicle, she stated, knowing the legal precedent, while calculating how far to push him. I don't need anything except probable cause. Caldwell shot back. And a black woman with an attitude and a locked case is all the probable cause I need in this town. The mask had fallen completely now. His bias explicitly stated and captured by multiple recording devices. Wilson shifted uncomfortably at his partner's words, glancing around as if suddenly aware they might be overheard. Watch her, Caldwell instructed Wilson as he returned to Jasmine's car. Through the windshield, she could see him rifling through her glove compartment again, removing items with growing frustration. When he returned, his expression had darkened further. Last chance before I break open that case. Jasmine remained silent, maintaining steady eye contact. Caldwell reached for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 17. Request K-9 unit at my location. Possible narcotics situation. The fabrication was now complete. With no drugs in her possession or vehicle. Jasmine instantly understood his intent. The K-9 unit would provide him with the pretext to claim a false positive, allowing him to plant evidence that he likely carried for just such opportunities. It was a tactic mentioned in multiple civilian complaints against him, but never proven. Until now. Jasmine made her decision. The investigation had yielded more than enough evidence of racial profiling, unlawful detention, and civil rights violations. Allowing Caldwell to plant drugs would cross a line from professional risk to personal danger. The time had come to adjust her approach, though not yet to reveal her full identity. As the distant sound of another police vehicle approached, Jasmine prepared for the confrontation's next phase. Knowing that whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just the outcome of her investigation, but potentially the future of policing in Oakwood. The approaching headlights of the K-9 unit sliced through the darkness, forcing Jasmine to make a critical decision before the situation escalated beyond her control. "Officer Caldwell," she called out, her voice level despite the handcuffs biting into her wrists. "I'd like to speak with you privately for a moment." Caldwell turned, surprise briefly flashing across his features before his customary arrogance reasserted itself. "Now you want to talk?" he mocked, but curiosity won out. He signaled Wilson to intercept the arriving K-9 unit while he returned to the patrol car. "Make it quick," he demanded, leaning into the open door. Jasmine met his gaze directly. Her next words carefully calculated. "I know about Thomas Martinez," she said quietly. The name belonged to a black college student who had filed a brutality complaint against Caldwell 3 years earlier, only to have the case mysteriously disappear from department records. Caldwell's reaction was instantaneous, a slight widening of the eyes, a tensing of the jaw. "I know about Dina Washington," she continued, referencing an elderly black woman whose car had been illegally seized after a fabricated drug charge, another complaint that had vanished without investigation. "I know about the 7 civil rights complaints filed against you in the past 2 years, all of which were buried by internal affairs. And I know about your involvement with the other officers who call themselves the Guardians." With each name and incident, Caldwell's expression shifted from shock to rage to something approaching fear. "Who the hell are you?" he hissed, glancing over his shoulder to ensure Wilson was still occupied with the K-9 officer. "A journalist? Some kind of activist?" "Someone who has been watching you very carefully," Jasmine replied, maintaining the precise balance between revelation and concealment. "Someone who knows that your body camera is conveniently turned off right now, just like it was during all those other incidents. The difference is that this time, everything is still being recorded." Caldwell instinctively reached for his camera, confirming her observation that it was deactivated. "You're bluffing," he whispered, but doubt had crept into his voice. "No recording would be admissible. You can't record police without consent in this state." It was a common misconception, one that worked in Jasmine's favor. "I'm not just recording," she corrected him. "I'm transmitting. Everything that's happened here tonight is already saved on secure servers far beyond your reach. The racial profiling, the illegal search, your explicit statements about my kind not being welcome in Oakwood. Your plan to use the K-9 unit to falsify probable cause so you can plant evidence." Caldwell's face drained of color. "You have no proof of that." "I don't need proof of your intentions," Jasmine replied. "I only need to document what actually happens. And I'm very interested to see what might suddenly appear in my car after the K-9 unit finishes its work." She let the implication hang in the air between them. "I should also mention that I'm not the only one investigating Oakwood PD. You're part of something much larger than you realize." This last statement was technically true, though deliberately misleading. The combined effect of her words had the desired impact. Caldwell straightened, the confident bully suddenly replaced by a man calculating his exposure. He stepped away from the patrol car, walking swiftly to where Wilson stood conversing with the K-9 officer. The 3 men huddled in intense discussion. Caldwell gesticulating sharply while Wilson repeatedly glanced back toward Jasmine with growing concern. Even from a distance, the division between them was becoming apparent. Wilson seemed to be arguing for caution, while Caldwell's body language suggested he wanted to escalate further. The K-9 officer, uninvolved in the original stop and clearly uncomfortable with the tension, kept his dog close by his side. After several minutes of heated exchange, Caldwell stalked back to the patrol car alone. His decision apparently made. "Listen carefully," he said, voice low and threatening as he leaned into the vehicle. "You're going to tell me exactly who you're working for right now. Or you're going to regret it. Nobody's watching except fellow officers, and we all go home at the end of the shift, understand? But people like you sometimes have accidents in custody. Things happen." The threat was explicit, far beyond anything Jasmine had anticipated. In that moment, she saw something in his eyes that went beyond racial bias or abuse of power. There was a coldness there. A calculation that suggested this was not the first time he had made such a threat, and possibly not the first time he had acted on one. "Officer Wilson doesn't seem to share your enthusiasm," she observed calmly. "In fact, he looks worried. Almost like a man who's realizing he might be on the wrong side of a federal investigation." The mention of federal was deliberate. A partial reveal to create uncertainty without exposing her FBI status. "Federal?" Caldwell scoffed, but his eyes darted involuntarily toward his colleagues. "You're bluffing. If this was federal, you'd have identified yourself by now." "Would I?" Jasmine countered. "Or would I want to see exactly how far you'd go when you thought you were dealing with an ordinary civilian? How many constitutional violations you'd commit? How explicit your racial bias would become when you thought no one who mattered was watching?" She allowed a slight smile. "For the record, everything that's happened here has been documented with multiple recording devices. Devices much better concealed than whatever you're planning to plant in my vehicle." Caldwell stepped back as if physically struck, his certainty visibly crumbling. He returned to Wilson and the K-9 officer, their discussion now more heated than before. Wilson's body language had shifted dramatically, his stance now defensive, creating physical distance between himself and Caldwell. The K-9 officer was already returning to his vehicle, clearly wanting no part of whatever was unfolding. As Jasmine watched through the patrol car window, she saw the dynamic of power shifting before her eyes. Wilson was backing away from Caldwell, both literally and figuratively. The partnership that had enabled years of abuse was fracturing under pressure. Caldwell, sensing his support evaporating, made one final, desperate decision. He stalked back to Jasmine, fury and fear battling for dominance in his expression. "Nobody will believe you," he snarled. "It's your word against two sworn officers. Even if you are some kind of investigator, we'll say you were aggressive, that you threatened us. It's how these things always go. The system protects its own." As he spoke, he reached toward his patrol car, opening the front passenger door and reaching inside. Jasmine couldn't see what he was retrieving, but the motion sent a chill through her. Was he desperate enough to plant evidence directly in front of his increasingly reluctant partner? Or was he reaching for something more immediately threatening? Have you ever been in a situation where the truth was your only weapon? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine should reveal her FBI identity now. Or number 2 if you think she should continue gathering evidence. Like this video if you're on the edge of your seat wondering what Caldwell is reaching for. And subscribe for more stories about justice being served to corrupt officials. What do you think is going through Officer Wilson's mind right now? Is he going to stand by his partner or do the right thing? Let's find out. Wilson's voice cut through the tension like a physical force. "Ryan, stop!" He moved with unexpected speed, intercepting Caldwell before he could fully retrieve whatever he was reaching for in the front seat of his patrol car. The two officers collided, Wilson's hand clamping firmly around Caldwell's wrist. "What the hell are you doing?" Wilson hissed, his voice low but intense. "She's recording everything. Don't you get it? It's over. Caldwell wrenched his arm free, shoving Wilson back with enough force to make the younger officer stumble. Get your hands off me, he snarled. You're either with me or against me. Make your choice right now. Their confrontation created the distraction Jasmine needed. Despite the handcuffs restricting her movement, she managed to shift her position enough to access the emergency signal button concealed in the lining of her jacket. A single press would alert her FBI team to her exact location and activate the highest priority response protocols. The small device vibrated once against her fingers, confirming the transmission. Help would arrive within minutes. Caldwell noticed her movement and broke away from Wilson, returning to the patrol car with renewed fury. What did you just do? He demanded, reaching in to grab her arm with bruising force. Nothing, Jasmine replied calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. Just adjusting these unnecessarily tight handcuffs. Get out, he ordered, yanking her from the vehicle with enough force to make her stumble. You want to play games? Let's see how you like sitting on the asphalt while we wait for that K-9 unit. As he forced her to the ground, Jasmine spoke the words she knew would be her best protection. I want to speak to a lawyer. I am invoking my right to legal counsel. Caldwell laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Lawyers are for people who've been charged with crimes. You haven't been charged. Yet. He emphasized the last word with dark promise. I'm being detained against my will while in full compliance with the law, Jasmine stated clearly, aware that every word was being recorded. That constitutes unlawful detention. I have the right to legal representation. Her calm recitation of her rights seemed to infuriate Caldwell further. With a sudden movement, he shoved her forward, causing her to fall face first toward the pavement. Only her quick reflexes allowed her to turn her shoulder to take the impact, avoiding facial injury but sending pain shooting through her side. The sound of additional vehicles approaching drew everyone's attention. 2 more Oakwood patrol cars pulled up, responding to some unheard call for backup. From the first emerged a middle-aged white man with captain's bars on his uniform, his expression severe as he surveyed the scene. Sergeant Dawson, he barked. What's the situation here? A heavy-set officer from the second vehicle stepped forward. Responding to Officer Caldwell's call about a suspicious person, Captain Harris. Possible narcotics situation. Captain Harris studied Jasmine, still lying handcuffed on the ground, then looked at Caldwell and Wilson. This traffic stop has been going on for 67 minutes according to dispatch. Where's the contraband? Where are the charges? Caldwell stepped forward, his confidence returning with the arrival of superior officers he clearly expected to support him. Subject was uncooperative, sir. Refused to allow search of a locked container in her vehicle. We were waiting for the K-9 unit, which just departed. The captain's eyes narrowed. And the reason for the initial stop? Taillight, Caldwell replied promptly. Left rear, inoperative. Captain Harris walked deliberately to Jasmine's car, examining the taillights, which were clearly functioning perfectly. He returned, his expression unreadable. Both taillights appear to be working properly, Officer Caldwell. Must have been intermittent. Caldwell replied without hesitation. It was definitely out when I initiated the stop. The captain turned to Jasmine, still on the ground. Ma'am, can you tell me your name and what you're doing in Oakwood? Before she could answer, Sergeant Dawson interjected. She's been in town about 2 weeks. Been asking questions about the department. Taking pictures of officers during stops. Some kind of activist or journalist, we think. I asked the lady, not you, Sergeant, Captain Harris said sharply. He extended a hand to help Jasmine to her feet, a gesture that clearly surprised both Caldwell and Wilson. My name is Jasmine Morgan, she answered, rising with as much dignity as the handcuffs allowed. I recently moved to Oakwood for work. I was driving home when Officer Caldwell pulled me over, claiming a taillight violation that clearly doesn't exist. I've been detained for over an hour, subjected to inappropriate touching during a search, racially demeaned, and physically assaulted. All without being informed of any charges against me. Captain Harris's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Those are serious allegations, Ms. Morgan. They're all documented, she replied steadily. The captain turned to Caldwell. Body camera footage? Caldwell hesitated, knowing he had violated department policy. Battery malfunction, sir. It stopped recording before the stop. And yours, Officer Wilson? Wilson swallowed hard, caught between loyalty and self-preservation. Same issue, Captain. Equipment failure. Captain Harris surveyed the scene again, a calculation happening behind his eyes. Jasmine recognized the look from countless similar situations throughout her career. This was a superior officer assessing liability, measuring the potential damage to the department against the instinct to protect his officers. Remove the handcuffs, he finally ordered. Miss Morgan, while I understand your frustration, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding that we can clear up. These are good officers with exemplary records. The institutional wagon circling had begun. Exactly as Jasmine had anticipated. While Sergeant Dawson reluctantly unlocked her handcuffs, she made her next move. I'd like my purse, please. It's still in my vehicle. The request seemed reasonable enough that Captain Harris nodded to Wilson. Get the lady's purse. As Wilson moved toward her car, Caldwell suddenly seemed to realize what might be happening. Wait, he called out, but it was too late. Wilson had already retrieved the designer handbag from the passenger seat and was returning with it. Jasmine rubbed her wrists, restoring circulation while maintaining her composed demeanor. Thank you, she said as Wilson handed her the purse. Every officer watched as she opened it, their expressions ranging from curiosity to growing apprehension. The moment had arrived to shift the power dynamic completely, to transform from victim to authority in a single gesture. Jasmine reached into her purse, her fingers finding the hidden compartment where her credentials waited. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Jasmine's fingers closed around the leather wallet containing her FBI credentials. She withdrew it slowly, deliberately, allowing the gold badge to catch the light from the patrol car's headlights. Federal Bureau of Investigation, she announced clearly, holding her identification where all officers present could see it. Special Agent Jasmine Morgan, Civil Rights Division. The effect was immediate and profound. Caldwell's face drained of color, his confident posture collapsing as the full implications crashed over him. Wilson took an involuntary step backward, his expression shifting from shock to naked fear. Sergeant Dawson froze mid-motion, his hand still extended from returning her handcuff key to his belt. Only Captain Harris maintained his composure, though the sudden tightening around his eyes betrayed his recognition of the catastrophe unfolding before him. I've been conducting an authorized federal investigation into patterns of racial profiling and civil rights violations within the Oakwood Police Department, Jasmine continued, her voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. For the past 3 weeks, I've documented numerous instances of discriminatory policing practices, with particular focus on officers who have shown consistent patterns of targeting minority citizens without legitimate cause. Caldwell found his voice first, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. This is a setup, he protested, looking frantically toward Captain Harris. She provoked this whole situation. I was just following standard procedure. Standard procedure? Jasmine repeated, turning her attention fully to him. Is it standard procedure to deactivate your body camera before initiating a traffic stop? To falsely claim a vehicle violation as pretext for a stop? To conduct an invasive search without probable cause? To use explicitly racial language while doing so? To threaten to plant evidence? With each question, Caldwell seemed to physically diminish. I was just doing my job, he muttered, the familiar refuge of officers caught in misconduct. Your job is to uphold the Constitution and protect the civil rights of all citizens, Jasmine corrected him, her tone professional but unyielding. Everything that has occurred during this encounter has been recorded by multiple devices and transmitted in real time to secure FBI servers. The audio and video evidence is already being analyzed by my team. She turned to address all the officers present. Additionally, this stop is part of a broader federal investigation that has been ongoing for several months. We have documented over 70 incidents of racially discriminatory policing practices within this department, including illegal searches, unlawful seizures of property, fabrication of evidence, and physical abuse of minority citizens. The sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. 3 unmarked SUVs with tinted windows pulled up, surrounding the scene. FBI agents emerged, moving with practiced efficiency as they secured the area. Agent Richardson, Jasmine's primary backup, approached with a confident stride. "Everything all right, Morgan?" he asked, though his eyes were already assessing the situation. "Situation contained," she confirmed. Officers Caldwell and Wilson were just about to surrender their badges and weapons pending the outcome of our investigation. Caldwell's hand moved reflexively to his holstered weapon, a motion instantly noticed by every FBI agent present. Their collective response was immediate, hands moving to their own weapons as they took defensive positions. "I wouldn't," Richardson warned quietly. Jasmine maintained her focus on Captain Harris, recognizing him as the key to de-escalating the situation. "Captain, I have federal warrants authorizing the seizure of all electronic devices and documentation related to this investigation, including body cameras, patrol car dash cams, and personal communication devices of the officers involved." She handed him a folded document from her purse. "I'm prepared to execute these warrants immediately, or your officers can cooperate voluntarily." Harris scanned the document, his law enforcement experience telling him it was entirely legitimate. The calculation behind his eyes shifted from damage control to self-preservation. "Sergeant Dawson, instruct all officers to surrender the requested items," he ordered, his voice tight but controlled. "Full cooperation, understood?" Dawson hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, sir." As the FBI agents began collecting evidence, Caldwell made a sudden break toward his patrol car. He managed only 3 steps before 2 agents intercepted him, taking him to the ground with practiced efficiency. "Ryan Caldwell, you are being detained for questioning in connection with multiple federal civil rights violations," Richardson stated as handcuffs were applied. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Wilson, watching his partner's restraint, raised his hands in immediate surrender. "I want to cooperate," he announced, his voice shaking. "I have information about other incidents, about how the system works. I'll testify." The betrayal was so swift that Caldwell could only stare in disbelief as his partner of 5 years transformed instantly into a potential witness against him. The wail of another siren announced the arrival of Oakwood's police chief, Leonard Prescott, a barrel-chested man in his 60s who emerged from his vehicle with thunderous expression. "What the hell is going on here, Harris?" he demanded, before registering the presence of multiple FBI agents. His stride faltered as Jasmine approached, presenting her credentials. "Chief Prescott, I'm Special Agent Jasmine Morgan, FBI. We're executing federal warrants related to an ongoing civil rights investigation into your department. I have documentation here requiring the immediate preservation of all departmental records." The chief's face flushed dark red as he processed the situation. "This is my jurisdiction," he began. But Jasmine cut him off smoothly. "This is a federal matter now, Chief Prescott. Your department has been under investigation for systematic civil rights violations for the past 6 months. Tonight's events are merely the culmination of extensive evidence gathering." She gestured toward the restrained Caldwell. "Officer Caldwell's actions tonight, which include false detention, conducting searches without probable cause, making explicitly racist statements, and threatening to plant evidence, have all been documented and will form part of our case." The chief looked around wildly, seeing his authority dissolving before his eyes. "You can't just come in here and take over my department. I have connections in Washington. Connections in the state capital." "I'm sure you do," Jasmine replied evenly. "And I'm equally sure they'll be distancing themselves from you by morning when the extent of this investigation becomes clear. This isn't about one traffic stop or one officer, Chief Prescott. This is about a pattern of behavior that you have, at minimum, failed to address, and at worst, actively encouraged." As she spoke, FBI technicians were already downloading data from patrol car computers, securing body cameras, and collecting officers' phones. The operation moved with the precision of months of planning, each agent knowing their role in preserving the chain of evidence. Agent Richardson approached again, speaking quietly. "Morgan, we've got a preliminary download from Caldwell's unofficial phone. There are text messages to other officers warning about your presence in town, referring to you with racial slurs, and discussing ways to run you out. Some messages specifically mention planting evidence during traffic stops as standard procedure for problematic minorities." Jasmine nodded, unsurprised but grimly satisfied. The evidence was even more damning than she had anticipated. "Make sure everything is properly secured for the U.S. Attorney. This case needs to be airtight." As the federal operation continued around her, Jasmine found herself face to face with Caldwell one final time as agents prepared to transport him for formal questioning. The arrogance had drained from his expression, replaced by a mixture of hatred and fear. "You set me up," he accused, his voice low and venomous. "You people are all the same. Always playing the victim, always crying racism." Even now, with his career in ruins and criminal charges looming, he clung to the prejudice that had defined his approach to policing. "No, Officer Caldwell," Jasmine replied calmly. "You set yourself up through years of violating the constitutional rights of citizens based on the color of their skin. I simply gave you the opportunity to reveal who you truly are." As he was led away, Jasmine turned her attention to the broader scene, where the power structure of Oakwood law enforcement was being systematically dismantled before her eyes. What had begun as a routine investigation had uncovered something far more pervasive. A culture of discrimination embedded within the department's daily operations, protected by a chain of command that valued conformity over justice. The night's events had broken that chain, creating an opportunity for genuine reform that would affect the lives of every minority citizen in Oakwood. The first phase of her mission was complete, but the more challenging work of systemic change was just beginning. 3 months passed like a whirlwind of depositions, evidence reviews, and courtroom appearances. Jasmine stood at the podium in Oakwood City Hall's main chamber, surveying the packed room with quiet satisfaction. Citizens of all backgrounds filled the seats, their attention focused on the formal announcement of the Justice Department's findings and the consent decree that would reshape their police department. The investigation into the Oakwood Police Department has uncovered what can only be described as systematic and deliberate violations of constitutional rights based primarily on race, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. Over a 6-month period, our team documented 127 incidents of racial profiling, 53 illegal searches, 32 cases of excessive force directed at minority citizens, and 21 instances where evidence appears to have been planted or falsified to justify arrests. The gasps and murmurs from the audience confirmed that despite rumors and community complaints, the full extent of the department's misconduct had remained hidden from public view. As a result of these findings, former Officer Ryan Caldwell and 4 other officers now face federal charges including deprivation of rights under color of law, witness intimidation, falsification of evidence, and conspiracy against rights. Jasmine paused, allowing the significance to register. Additionally, 12 other officers have received administrative punishments ranging from suspension to termination for their roles in either participating in or failing to report these violations. In the front row, Walter Johnson sat with dignified composure, his grandson beside him. The young man's case had been one of the first to be reviewed and dismissed following the investigation. his record expunged of the fabricated charges. Beside them sat Wilson, now the department's key cooperating witness, his testimony having proven crucial in mapping the extent of the corruption. His cooperation had earned him immunity from prosecution, though not from the consequences of his earlier complicity. Former Police Chief Prescott and former Captain Harris had both resigned rather than face termination, their political connections proving insufficient to shield them from the overwhelming evidence of their failure to supervise and their active suppression of civilian complaints. Moving forward, Jasmine continued, the Oakwood Police Department will operate under a federal consent decree for a minimum of 5 years. This decree mandates comprehensive reforms including mandatory body cameras with automatic uploading to secure servers, civilian review of all use of force incidents, implicit bias training, and community-based policing initiatives. She gestured toward a diverse group seated on the dais behind her. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board, chaired by Mr. Walter Johnson, will have direct input into departmental policies and review authority over officer conduct. The consent decree represented hundreds of hours of negotiation between the Justice Department, city officials, and community representatives. Its provisions went beyond punishing past misconduct to address the structural issues that had allowed discrimination to become institutionalized within the department. After the formal announcement, Jasmine's duties included a final meeting with the U.S. Attorney and city officials to finalize implementation timelines. As she gathered her materials, a court officer approached. Agent Morgan. The prisoner is ready for transport if you still want that meeting. She nodded, having requested this final conversation for both professional and personal closure. The small conference room in the courthouse basement felt appropriately austere for what might be her last interaction with Ryan Caldwell. He sat at the table in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled to a belt around his waist, the uniform of federal detention replacing the police uniform he had once used as armor against accountability. He didn't rise when she entered, his expression a mixture of resignation and simmering resentment. "Come to gloat?" he asked as she took the seat across from him. "No," Jasmine replied simply. "I came to understand." She placed a folder on the table between them. "Your record before joining Oakwood PD shows a different officer. Commendations from your previous department in Rochester. Positive performance reviews. Community engagement initiatives. What changed, Caldwell?" He stared at her for a long moment, weighing his response. With his trial pending and his future already in ruins, he seemed to calculate that honesty offered no additional risk. "You wouldn't understand," he finally said. "Try me." Something in her tone, a genuine curiosity rather than judgment, seemed to reach him. "When I transferred to Oakwood, I was told how things worked here. Not officially, of course. Chief Prescott never put it in writing. But the message was clear. Property values were the priority. Keeping Oakwood safe meant keeping it white." He leaned forward slightly. "The mayor, the city council, the homeowners association. They never said it explicitly. They just rewarded officers who understood the unspoken policy. Promotions, overtime, the good assignments. All went to cops who kept the element from neighboring communities from getting too comfortable in Oakwood. And you went along with it," Jasmine observed. "It wasn't a question." Caldwell shrugged, the chains at his wrists clinking softly. "At first it was small things. Extra traffic patrols in areas where black visitors might pass through. Responding faster to calls about suspicious persons who always happened to be minorities. Then it escalated. We were encouraged to find reasons for stops, to conduct searches, to send the message that certain people weren't welcome." His gaze hardened. "You know what happened the one time I questioned it? I was passed over for sergeant. Assigned to night shifts for 6 months, treated like I wasn't a team player. So I became one." The rationalization was familiar to Jasmine from countless similar investigations. The gradual corruption of individuals within a system that rewarded conformity to biased practices. And the planted evidence? The threats? The violence? Were those also just being a team player? She pressed. Caldwell's jaw tightened. By then, it was how we operated. Wilson, Dennison, Roberts, we had a system. Certain cars you pulled over. Certain people you searched. If you needed probable cause, you created it. Everyone knew. Everyone approved, as long as the arrest statistics looked good and the right people got the message. His confession, delivered with more resignation than remorse, confirmed what the investigation had uncovered. A department-wide culture that had normalized discrimination and elevated property values above constitutional rights. The impact of that culture extended far beyond Caldwell's individual actions, affecting hundreds of lives and eroding community trust in fundamental institutions. 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning, Jasmine returned to Oakwood one final time to observe a significant marker of the transformation her investigation had initiated. The Police Academy graduation ceremony represented the first class of officers recruited and trained under the new departmental standards. As the federal agent who had exposed the department's failures, she had been invited to give the keynote address. The badge you receive today carries both authority and responsibility, she told the diverse group of graduates. The authority comes from the law, but the responsibility comes from the community's trust. That trust has been broken here in Oakwood, and rebuilding it will be your most important mission. She scanned the eager faces before her, noting with satisfaction that the class reflected a much broader demographic than the department had previously employed. You are not enforcers separate from the community, but guardians who are part of it. The Constitution you swore to uphold protects everyone equally, regardless of race, background, or appearance. Remember that every interaction, every traffic stop, every response call is an opportunity to either strengthen or damage the bond between police and the people they serve. Among the graduates sat Walter Johnson's grandson, Marcus. His decision to join the Reform Department representing a powerful symbol of the potential for healing and progress. As the ceremony concluded and the new officers dispersed to celebrate with family members, Jasmine found herself standing beside Walter, watching his grandson receive congratulations from fellow graduates. Never thought I'd live to see this day, the elderly man said quietly. My grandson wearing the same badge as the men who once threw him against a car for driving while black. World changes if you push it hard enough. The changes are just beginning, Jasmine acknowledged. The consent decree is a framework, but the real transformation depends on people like Marcus staying true to their principles even when tested. Walter nodded thoughtfully. He knows that. Talks about being part of the solution, about policing from within the community instead of above it. Different language than I grew up hearing from cops. He turned to face her directly. Your investigation did that. Gave us a chance to start over, to build something better. As Jasmine prepared to depart Oakwood for the final time, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a teenager experiencing discrimination in this very town to a federal agent with the power to demand institutional accountability. The case had been professionally significant, likely to advance her career within the Bureau, but its personal meaning ran deeper. The systemic changes now unfolding would affect countless lives, creating space for the kind of community where a young black woman might drive home without fear of being targeted simply because of her appearance. Outside the academy building, she encountered Marcus Johnson in his new uniform, the badge catching the sunlight as he extended his hand. Agent Morgan, I wanted to thank you personally. Not just for what you did for my family, but for giving me the chance to be part of making things right. Officer Johnson, she replied, accepting his handshake. Remember that real change happens one interaction at a time. One decision at a time. The hardest work is still ahead. He nodded solemnly. I know. But for the first time, it feels possible. As she drove away from Oakwood, passing the spot where Caldwell had pulled her over that fateful night, Jasmine considered the complex interplay of justice and transformation. The criminal charges against the former officers represented necessary accountability. But the true measure of success would be the community's ability to build something better from the ashes of a flawed system. The consent decree provided structure. But the human commitment to equal justice would determine whether lasting change took root. Her investigation had opened the door to possibility, but the people of Oakwood, including its newest police officers, would determine what walked through it. What do you think about Jasmine's approach to exposing corruption? Would you have revealed your identity earlier? Or handled the situation differently? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story of justice and transformation inspired you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about people making a difference. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that systemic change is possible, even in the most entrenched institutions. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful agent of change is simply someone brave enough to document the truth. Jasmine Morgan's story teaches us that confronting systemic racism requires both courage and strategy. By methodically documenting evidence rather than making immediate accusations, she built an irrefutable case that couldn't be dismissed as an isolated incident. Her approach shows that lasting change comes not from exposing individual racist officers alone, but by revealing the institutional structures that enable and reward discrimination. The transformation of Oakwood demonstrates that accountability must be followed by structural reform. Criminal charges provided justice, but the Civilian Oversight Board, body cameras, and recruitment of diverse officers created the foundation for lasting change. This case reminds us that the most entrenched systems can be reformed when evidence is meticulously gathered and properly leveraged. Perhaps most importantly, this story illustrates how power dynamics can shift when injustice is exposed through proper channels. What began as a routine traffic stop based on racial profiling became the catalyst for dismantling decades of discrimination. The officers who once seemed untouchable discovered that no badge places anyone above the Constitution. This narrative ultimately reminds us that justice often requires personal risk. But systemic change is possible when determined individuals refuse to accept discrimination as inevitable. Have you ever witnessed racial profiling in your community or experienced discrimination firsthand? What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Revealed your identity earlier or continued gathering evidence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage and accountability inspired you, please hit that like button to help others find this important message. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about brave individuals fighting systemic injustice and creating meaningful change. Would you trust a reformed police department with new leadership and oversight, or do you believe more fundamental changes are needed? Let us know your perspective. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how racial discrimination operates within institutions, or with anyone working to create more just communities. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply documenting the truth with unwavering determination.